Well, I certainly hope you've enjoyed the videos so far. This video here, we're going to start getting into colorizing a picture. And I'm going to use this series of pictures here. We've seen this one earlier when we talked about. Sorry, what the heck was that? I'll get back to that in a second. Um, when we talked about fixing tears and things like that, we upgraded the picture, got rid of the tears. You can see this one actually went back to sepia tone. Forgot to change that. Uh, and we fixed the hair. We got the thing all dressed up. Then we went through some skin colorization, skin smoothing, getting ready for colorizing. Because before you colorize an image, you want it to be nice and smooth like this, black and white. And turn it black and white. Get rid of the sepia tone. You don't want sepia here. We fixed up the eyes, sharpened those, put a little gloss in our lips. What I didn't show here is I've actually, in a later version, in a color version, she has an earring here because no earring is shown here. So the final version became this picture here. So how do we get from this picture to this picture? Okay, so let's say we've done all that, and we're at this picture here. I'm in Lightroom. Command E for edit. Okay, edit copy with Lightroom adjustments. Yes. So I'm going to bring this picture into Photoshop, and we'll start colorizing it. The very first step in colorizing a picture is usually, to me anyways, the skin tones. Okay, and the way to do skin tones we talked about in an earlier video is create a palette of picture of colors from an existing picture. So you'll see that in an earlier video. So we're sitting here now with this picture on the background. Just to keep everything copacetic, I'm going to make a copy of it by using Command J on that layer. Now I'm going to got this copy going. We're going to start colorizing the image. I'm going to use a palette of colors. Uh, these palettes were created earlier in another video. Bring the palette over. Uh, if you don't have palettes in this library, you can just open another file and copy paste it on top of this one with your palette, which is fine. Just save your palette as an image and then copy paste it. There's not too much color difference between these two, so I'm going to be probably just using one of those. Um, let's see. There's two ways of doing this colorizing. First, of course, like I said, I'll repeat that the image has got to be nice and smooth. You don't want to be coloring on an image that's a lot of grains in it. Uh, so I've got the skin box here, the skin palette put on top. Let's start by using a simple method, and then I'll use a more complex method later on. The simple method is just creating a blank layer right on top of the one I just had. Okay, going to Edit, Fill with Color. Okay, you'll see this eyedropper comes up. I'll select a nice mid-tone color. Okay, you'll see it fill that with that color. Say OK. And we've filled the entire layer here, as you can see, with that color. What I can do now is I can turn off this little palette. I'll change the blend mode of this layer here to color. You can actually use other blend modes depending on what kind of effect you want, and they work fine, especially when you're looking at other colors. If I'm going to do the dress or the background, I might try different blend modes. And some of them work better, some of them work worse. You'll have to decide what you like to do. I usually go to color first. Okay, so I've got the blend mode as color. I've got one color that is now being blended across here. You see it gets darker to lighter. The background image does a good job of creating that effect. But I don't want the whole picture that color, obviously. So this technique you'll use over and over again every time you put a color down. You'll create the color you want. You'll then create a mask on that color, right? I'll hit Control I. And if you heard the telephone go off, you know you get a lot of junk calls. I get a lot of junk calls too. Sorry about that. I'm not going to make this video over. I get the mask. I then invert the mask by hitting Control I. So the mask, this color is now hidden. Of course, the way to get to that color is if you know the shortcut, you hit B. for brush. Okay, the brush I want is going to be not all the way soft, but somewhat soft. Okay, it's going to be a normal blend mode, opacity 100%. I've got myself a brush. If you don't have black and white here, you're going to paint with the top color of these two. If it's some other color combination, hit D so that it turns it to black and white. Okay, D is the default colors. And then if I hit X, I can toggle back and forth between these two colors. I'm going to be coloring on white on black to reveal. Okay, using the bracket keys, those square bracket keys, I can up and down this brush size, right? So as I color on, make sure you're not sitting here, but I color on the mask, I'll start seeing the skin tone come in, okay? Nice, nice, pretty skin tone. Uh, and since this was, the idea is that you have to start with the skin tones of the person you're dealing with. This is my grandmother. I assume she was probably roughly my skin tone, and that's what I would do. If I were coloring somebody of different heritage, I might do differently, okay? My heritage happens to be Latin American and American. My mother was American, so I got sort of a mix, I guess. Probably more my mother than my grandmother. So this may not be perfect. So anyways, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but as you can see, and what's important here is that I'm not going all the way to the edge of these pictures, of these where the skin is, okay? And I would be careful, and I would go up and down on this thing and the size of the brush and make sure that I got everything the way I want it. And as I get to the edge, close to the edge, I would leave it just a little off the edge. I can probably go ahead and cover her mouth because I'll show you what I do a little later on. And of course, I get close to the eyes and be careful of that. I may even put some eyeshadow in there later on if I wanted to make her. Oops! So now, see, that's why you have a toggle. See, I went over, hit the toggle switch to black, and clean that up. Okay. Now we're back to this. Now, why don't I go close to the edge? Well, I don't want to make this thing look cartoony. So one of the ways, cartoony would be very, very sharp color edges, right? So if I zoom in on this thing and get close to the edges here, I'm using a soft brush, so there's a soft edge to what I've done here, okay? But even to make sure that I don't get any further into this thing, let me just get off here. I will get into, I will change the opacity. Look at this. It's now changed to a different color. I know. Oh, that's because I'm painting. That painting was done on the layer, which I shouldn't have done. I should have been painting on the mask. Okay. You see that color that I? When you make a mistake, the reason that red shows up is I'm coloring this color here right on top of this thing here. I don't want to do that. Command Z gets rid of what I just did. Let's go back to my mask and color with white, which I should have done. I can now get a little bit closer if I want to, but I don't want to get all the way close. The edge is soft, but just to make sure that the edge is really soft and blended in as I get toward the edges and not too cartoony, I'll go up and change the opacity of this the brush itself to make it slightly smaller. I'll make this brush smaller, and then every brush stroke I put on there builds the color in and allows me to be a little bit more careful as I approach the edges and makes sure that I don't create something that looks totally goofy. And I want to go right up to the blurred edge here. I mean, I don't want to leave a little ring around her that is the black and white color. So I actually want to get rid of that little ring there. So I'm going up right up against this edge. If I go over when I color the dress here, I might be able to mask that, or I'd have to maybe back it off. But as I go around here, I'm just being sure that I don't get too close in. Now, if you're wondering why does it take so long to do this kind of work, you are seeing it right here. It takes long because if you're going to do a good job, you got to be very detail oriented. So yes, I'm doing every single little pearl strand by itself. There is no magic. There's no way of just making it happen. You might think, well, heck, why don't you use the selection tool and fill in the color? Well, you could do that, but these old pictures sometimes there's not enough contrast and everything in the picture to do the selection tool. So anyways, that would be the technique right there. And as I go along, I'll fill this in, okay? So that's the technique, the simple techniques, which using this layer of color here. And as you can see, when I get out of the picture, the color's not bad, okay? Something else I would do, let me bring this layer back. I would then go back and create another blank layer, okay? I would edit and fill that layer with color, okay, that color. And I would do some nice bright, we're going to use a little bit of blush color here. If you're into makeup, you'll know what I'm doing here. I'm going to do the same thing. I've got that color filled with the blush color. I'm going to create a mask for it. I'm going to, first of all, change the blend mode to color. Oops, not luminosity, color. So I hit the wrong one, color. I'm going to take the mask. I'm going to invert the mask. Okay, now you're not seeing that blush color. I can go back now with a brush with white, like we did before, and put some blush on her lips. Give her red lips. If I want to, and you'll notice the opacity is down here. If I'd gone full opacity, her lips would look like radioactive lips. When I want to do very subtle, I might go pretty low opacity. I might make this brush pretty darn big and just give her a little bit of pink on her cheeks. Why? Because it makes her look more human. Okay, a little pink on her cheeks. Maybe she got sunburned that day. And giving her a little bit of that kind of thing. So there you are. I'm doing a job of, okay, I could say maybe she went to the bar last night. This is my grandmother. I shouldn't be doing this. And giving her a little bit of a red nose. That's too much. But anyways, I want to show you the effect anyways. That's how you build up using a low opacity brush, putting a little color in their cheeks and things like that. All right. You could do the same thing with a little blue on her eyes if you wanted to. I'm going to probably use brown. If she was brown-eyed like I am, I'd use some brown on her eyes, paint them in. We'll talk about painting other areas in the next video. Okay, that's the easy way of doing color. It certainly produces decent results, as you can see here. I want to, it's never too good to be too easy. So let's get rid of what we just did here. I'm getting rid of these two layers here. And let's look at how we can do things more difficult. Let's go back to this layer here. Instead of adding a blank layer like I did before down here, adding a blank layer onto here, what I'm going to do this time is add a gradient map. What is a gradient map? Well, a gradient map, if you want to show this to pop out, it's popping out of the side over here. There's different things here. See the properties area. You have to make sure that I think it's view, properties, window. There you go. That properties is checked here, okay? So if that's not popping out, make sure you go to Windows Properties and make sure that pops out. So I'm getting properties popping out here. A gradient map is essentially, if I click on, not on the mask, I go back to the gradient map here, bring this up, it shows a gradient from dark. It says the dark colors will be this color, and the light colors will be this color, and it'll transition back and forth. And if I change the blend mode of this gradient map, like I have done before, so the gradient map here is color. Okay, now it's going to give me a gradient from here to here, but I don't want those colors. That's obviously a reddish gradient here. I want these colors here. I want this to be the gradient here. So how do I do that? Making sure that first of all I'm clicked here and not on the mask, because if I do the mask, I'm just going to get white. Okay, I need to be clicked here. Click on the low end and say, okay, I want the low colors, the darkest colors to be this color here. You see that's changed. I want to create another color set. Since these two are about the same, I'm just going to go up to here. Okay, and I want another color to be this one here. And on the very lightest end, I want the color to be that there. So now my gradient is, oops, sorry about that, I don't want to do that. My gradient is going from here to here. And once you've finished doing the colorization, you can actually go click back on this gradient map and adjust these back and forth to see if you like the effect more or less. in terms of where these transitions happen, okay? But let's just say for right now, that's what I want. That's the gradient, and I'll click OK. Okay. Now that I've got the gradient map, certainly I can click off on this, get rid of the. Well, now that I got the gradient map, I do end up doing the same thing. I click over to the mask. If you forget, for example, and you're sitting on this, and I do Control I to invert it, I get a really, really bad effect here because what I end up doing is screwing things up. So let's go back and click that. Now this is off. Okay, this is pretty good. And I will now, just a second, make sure I didn't do anything wrong. I did. Gradient's still the same. I thought, yeah, a little OCD kicking in here. Let's go back to this. Now I've got the gradient map off so you can't see it. Doing the same thing we did before. I now will paint in with a high opacity the skin tone. Okay, it's looking the same to you, I know that. But believe me, it isn't quite the same. This technique, since it's using real skin tones going through from bright, dark to light, will tend to give you a little more depth. And you can play around with it. You may not think it's important. But the technique from here on out is the same, right? I'm just paying it in. So there you go. That's skin tones. And I've taught you how to come into the corners here. And just to show you how it's done, there's no earring over here. So that's bothering me as I look at this thing. So what I will do here is do a clone stamp tool. And you notice I went down to the original image when I did this because I have to clone that earring. Option, click, select. Her earring's hanging about over here, I think. I can barely see it. And, well, what we'll do is create ourselves a little earring. Okay, she's got an earring now. All right, there you go. Now I'm ready to go. So we'll keep this in place and do some more coloring in the next slideshow.